The hospital was quiet except for the soft beep of machines and the low murmur of nurses talking. But outside room 208, something unusual was happening. A golden retriever named Max lay curled on the cold floor. He hadn't moved in 2 days. His eyes were wide open, staring at the door. His ears perked up every time someone walked by, but he never got up. He was waiting for someone very important. Max's owner, Jack, was inside that room. He had collapsed in his home 2 days ago. The neighbors had found him and called an ambulance. Jack hadn't woken up since. The doctors said he had a stroke. His brain was badly hurt, and no one knew if he would ever wake up again. But Max did not care about what the doctors said. He believed Jack was coming back. When the ambulance came for Jack, Max tried to jump in. He barked and whined and refused to leave his owner's side. One of the paramedics had to hold him back. Max had never been apart from Jack before, not even for one night. Now Max was in the hospital, lying outside Jack's door. The nurses tried to move him, but he growled softly and lay back down. He wasn't angry. He was just scared and tired and heartbroken. One kind nurse, Tara, brought him water and food, but Max didn't eat. He just sniffed the bowl and went back to watching the door. "He's grieving," Tara whispered to another nurse. "He misses his person." Everyone in the hospital started to notice Max. Some thought it was sad. Others thought it was sweet. But no one could get him to leave. That night, Tara sat beside Max. She patted his head gently. "You really love him, huh?" she said softly. Max didn't move, but his tail thumped once. Just once. The next morning, something strange happened. One of the doctors walked by and glanced at the screen showing Jack's heart and brain activity. Everything looked the same as yesterday. No change. But just then, Max let out a soft whine. He stood up for the first time in days and began to paw at the door. Tara rushed over. "What's wrong, boy?" Max barked once. Not loudly, just enough to get attention. Moments later, the alarms inside the room went off. Jack's heartbeat had changed. Doctors and nurses ran inside. Max sat down again, staring, waiting. Jack wasn't awake, but something was happening. His brain showed a flicker of activity, a small spark, just enough to get the doctors talking. Could the dog have sensed that? One nurse asked. "It's possible," the doctor replied. "Animals are more aware than we think." Everyone looked at Max with new eyes. This wasn't just a loyal dog. Something deeper was going on. That night, Tara brought Max a blanket and a soft pillow. "You're not just waiting, are you?" she whispered. "You know something." Max lay down on the blanket, his head resting near the door. His eyes never left it. And deep inside the room, Jack's fingers twitched slightly. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was a sign that maybe Jack wasn't gone. And Max had known it all along. The next few days felt like a lifetime. Max never left the hospital room. He refused to eat, refused to drink. He was tired, but he wouldn't sleep. Not while Jack was still in the room. Tara brought him food and water, but he just sniffed it and walked away. He spent every moment watching the door, waiting for Jack to wake up. Some nurses said Max should be sent home, but Tara couldn't do it. She knew Max wasn't just waiting. He was doing something important. One morning, the hospital staff was busy preparing for the day. Tara walked to the nurses' station and saw the doctors talking in a quiet corner. She approached them, hoping for some good news. "How's Jack doing?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. The doctors looked at her with tired eyes. "There's no change," one said. "We're doing everything we can, but his brain is damaged. It's hard to say when or if he'll wake up." Tara nodded, but something inside her told her not to give up. She walked back to Jack's room, where Max was still sitting by the door, looking lost. Tara crouched down beside him. "You know, buddy, if you could just take a break. You've been guarding that door for days." Max didn't look at her. He just stayed there, watching, waiting. But then something happened. As Tara reached out to pat his head, she noticed a small movement. She froze. Max's tail, just a little, began to wag. It was a small thing, but it made Tara's heart skip a beat. "Max," she whispered, "what's happening?" She watched carefully. The tail wagged again, slowly, quietly. And then, just as Max's tail stopped moving, she heard it. A soft, weak sound. A groan. A mumble. Tara's heart raced. She looked into Jack's room, but nothing had changed. Jack was still lying there, his eyes closed, his body still. But that sound, that was a sign. Max heard it too. His ears perked up, and he stood up, walking toward the door. He pawed at it once, twice. His eyes were wide and alert. Tara couldn't believe what she was seeing. Was Jack finally waking up? Tara rushed inside the room. She knelt beside Jack's bed, looking closely at his face. The doctors had said it could take weeks or longer for Jack to show any signs of improvement. But here, in this moment, she saw something. Something small, but important. Jack's fingers twitched again. It wasn't much, but it was there. "Jack," Tara whispered, her voice trembling. "Jack, can you hear me?" She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Max stood beside her, watching. His body was tense, as if he too was waiting for Jack to respond. The doctors had said it could be impossible. But maybe, just maybe, Jack could hear her. Maybe the connection between a man and his dog was stronger than anything anyone had ever known. Suddenly, Jack's eyelids fluttered. His eyes opened, just a little. Tara gasped, holding her breath. She had seen this in movies, but she never imagined it could happen for real. Jack blinked, then blinked again. His eyes focused on Tara, then slowly shifted toward Max, who was standing beside her, his tail wagging softly. "Max." Jack's voice was weak, barely a whisper, but it was there. Tara's heart soared. "Jack. Oh my God. You're awake. Max. Max has been here, right by your side." Jack's lips curved into a tiny smile, and he whispered, "He never left." Max let out a soft whine, nudging Jack's hand with his nose. Jack's fingers weakly moved to scratch Max's ears. Max's tail wagged faster. It was the first real movement from Jack since the stroke. For a moment, everything in the world stopped. There was no beeping machine, no busy hospital. It was just Jack and Max together again. The bond between them was as strong as ever. It was clear that Max had never given up on his friend. Tara wiped away a tear. "You're not alone anymore, Jack," she said softly. "Max is here. He's always been here." Jack's eyes fluttered open again the next morning. His body felt heavy, like it was made of stone. His head ached. But when he looked down, he saw Max, his faithful dog, sitting by the bed, watching him carefully. Max's tail thumped softly against the floor, as if to say, "You're awake. Finally." Jack smiled weakly. "Max." His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Max leaned in closer, licking Jack's hand gently. His eyes sparkled with the same love and loyalty Jack had known for so many years. It felt like a dream, but Jack knew it wasn't. Max was really there, and Jack was alive. "Thank you, boy," Jack murmured, stroking Max's fur. "You never gave up on me." The hospital room felt different now. It was still full of machines, but the beeping wasn't as scary anymore. Jack felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in days. Tara came into the room later, her face lighting up when she saw Jack's eyes open. "Jack, you're awake." Jack nodded, trying to sit up. It was hard, and his muscles felt stiff, but Max was right there to help. The dog nudged Jack's shoulder, as if saying, "I'm here, you can do this." "I don't know how long I've been out," Jack said, his voice still weak, "but it feels like forever." "You've been in a coma for 4 days. Tara explained gently. "We weren't sure when you'd wake up, but Max—" She paused and smiled. "Max never left your side. He was with you all along." Jack looked at Max, who was now lying down at the edge of the bed, his head resting on Jack's foot. "He saved me, didn't he?" Tara nodded. "In his own way, yes. We don't know how, but he knew something was wrong before we did. He didn't leave you, and because of him, we didn't give up." Jack swallowed, his throat dry. "I owe him everything." Max let out a soft whine, as if he understood. His eyes met Jack's, and for a moment, it felt like nothing in the world mattered except the two of them. Over the next few days, Jack's recovery was slow but steady. The doctors were amazed by the progress he was making, even though they had warned him it would take months, maybe even years, to fully heal. But with Max by his side, Jack felt like he could do anything. Every morning, Max helped Jack with his therapy. At first, it was hard. Jack could barely lift his arm. His legs were stiff. But every time Jack struggled, Max was there, pushing him forward, nudging him when Jack lost his balance, and lying beside him when he felt too tired to continue. One afternoon, Tara watched from the doorway as Jack tried to take a few steps across the room. It was painful, but Jack was determined. Max was right beside him, his leash gently tugging Jack forward. "You're doing great, Jack," Tara said, her voice full of encouragement. Jack grinned through the pain. "I couldn't do this without Max." Max wagged his tail as if he understood. By the end of the week, Jack was walking on his own. He wasn't running or jogging yet, but it was a start. And with Max by his side, Jack knew he would keep going, one step at a time. The doctors said Jack was improving faster than expected, and they began to talk about the next steps in his recovery. But Jack wasn't focused on the hospital anymore. He was focused on going home, where Max had always been. "Can we go home now?" Jack asked one evening, his voice filled with hope. Tara smiled. "Not yet. But soon, Jack. Soon." Jack looked down at Max, who had curled up at the foot of the bed, his head resting on his paws. "I'm ready," Jack whispered. And so is he. A week later, Jack sat in a wheelchair by the hospital window, looking out at the bright sky. The world outside seemed so far away, so different from the sterile walls of the hospital. But the view didn't bother him. It was a reminder that he was still here, still alive, and he owed it all to Max. Max was lying at Jack's feet, his head resting on the wheelchair's footrest. It seemed like every time Jack moved, Max was right there, watching him with those loyal eyes. It was like Max could sense when Jack needed him most. "You're my hero, you know that," Jack said quietly, looking down at his dog. Max's tail wagged once, and Jack chuckled. "You always know just what I need." Tara came into the room, holding a clipboard with some papers. She smiled when she saw Max lying at Jack's feet. "You two have become quite the team, haven't you?" she said. Jack nodded. "He's been my only team for a while now. He never gave up on me." Tara walked over to Jack, her smile softening. "It's amazing how much progress you've made. The doctors are impressed. They're even talking about you going home soon." Jack's heart lifted. Home. That word meant so much to him now. It was the place he wanted to be. With Max, it was the place where everything felt right again. "I'm ready," Jack said. "I've been ready for days. But I can't leave without Max." Tara laughed softly. "I think Max has earned his place in your home, that's for sure." Jack looked down at Max, who was now looking up at him with a trusting gaze. "I couldn't have made it through without him," Jack said, his voice filled with emotion. "He was with me when no one else was. He's the reason I'm still here." The next day, Jack was finally allowed to go home. The doctors were still cautious, but they were amazed by his progress. Jack couldn't wait to get back to the small house by the lake where he and Max had spent so many happy years together. It was where he felt safe, where he felt like himself. Tara helped Jack into the car, and Max jumped in after him, settling into the back seat. Jack smiled as he looked at his dog. "We're going home, buddy. Just you, me, and the open road." The ride home felt like a new beginning. The air outside was fresh, the sun shining down on the world. Jack felt the weight of the past few weeks lift from his shoulders. With Max by his side, he knew he could face anything. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Max jumped out of the car before Jack could even open his door. The dog ran up the steps to the front door, tail wagging furiously. Jack followed slowly, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. It had been so long since he'd been here, since he'd felt truly at home. Inside, the house was just as he remembered it. The same pictures on the walls, the same worn couch in the living room. But there was something different now, something that made it feel even more like home. Max trotted around the house, sniffing everything, making sure it was exactly the way he remembered. Jack chuckled softly as he watched Max run from room to room. It was like the dog was making sure everything was in its place. "Good boy," Jack said, his voice filled with affection. Max returned to Jack's side, sitting down beside him with a happy sigh. Jack reached out and scratched his dog's ears. "We're home, Max, and we're going to make this place our home again. Together." That night, Jack sat on the porch, looking out at the lake. Max lay beside him, his head resting on Jack's foot. The evening air was cool, and the sound of the water lapping against the shore was peaceful. Jack had a long road ahead of him, full of therapy and hard work. But with Max by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The bond between them had always been strong, but now, after everything they had been through, it was unbreakable. Jack knew he could never repay Max for everything he had done, but he would spend the rest of his life trying. "Thanks, buddy," Jack whispered, leaning down to kiss Max's head, "for never giving up on me." Max's tail wagged in response, and Jack smiled. The road to recovery would be long, but with Max, he knew he wasn't alone. Weeks passed, and Jack's recovery was still slow but steady. Every day, he pushed himself a little more, determined to regain his strength. At first, it was hard to do even the simplest things. His muscles ached, and his balance was off. But Max was always there, right beside him. One morning, as Jack sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, he looked out at the lake, feeling the cool breeze against his skin. The days were getting warmer, and the world outside was coming back to life. Max was lying next to him, his eyes half closed in the sun. "You're getting good at this relaxing thing," Jack said, smiling at his dog. Max opened one eye, then yawned, stretching out lazily. Jack chuckled and reached down to scratch behind Max's ears. "I guess I could learn a thing or two from you." Jack's physical therapy had been tough, but each small victory made him feel more confident. He was able to walk longer distances without feeling exhausted, and his arms were getting stronger. It wasn't easy, but he knew that with Max by his side, he could do it. Tara had been visiting regularly, checking on his progress. "You're doing great, Jack," she'd say with a smile. "I think you're ready for some more challenging exercises." Jack was always nervous about the harder tasks, but he didn't want to let fear hold him back anymore. "I'm ready," he told her one afternoon, sitting up straighter. "Let's do it." With Max watching from the corner, Jack worked through a series of exercises, lifting weights and walking on a treadmill. He didn't get it all perfect, but he did his best. Max stayed close, as if he knew exactly what Jack needed. When Jack stumbled or felt like giving up, Max would nudge him gently, as though saying, "Keep going, I believe in you." That night, after finishing a particularly tough therapy session, Jack sat on the couch with Max curled up beside him. He was tired, but a part of him felt proud. He was getting stronger, and it was all because of the support he had, especially Max. Jack rubbed Max's head, feeling the dog's warmth and steady presence. "You've been my rock, buddy," he whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Max responded with a soft whine, as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." One afternoon, Jack decided to take Max for a walk around the lake. It was something they used to do together all the time before Jack's stroke. The walk was slow at first. Jack was still getting used to his new body, and his legs didn't always cooperate the way he wanted them to. But Max, always patient, stayed by his side, walking at a pace that matched Jack's. As they walked, Jack felt a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in a long time. The world felt bigger again, full of possibilities. Max pulled gently on the leash, his tail wagging, as if he, too, was enjoying the moment. At one point, Jack stopped and took a deep breath. The fresh air felt good in his lungs, and the sound of birds singing made him smile. "We've come a long way, huh, Max?" Jack said, looking down at his dog. Max looked up at him, his eyes full of love and trust. "I think we're going to be okay." Max wagged his tail and barked happily, his energy contagious. Jack laughed, his heart light. He had been through so much, and there were still hard days ahead, but he knew now that he wasn't alone. Max would always be there, walking beside him, no matter how long or difficult the journey. That night, Jack sat on the porch again, the sun setting over the lake. Max was lying next to him, his head resting on Jack's foot, content and calm. Jack felt a deep peace settle over him. He wasn't fully healed yet, but he was getting there. And with Max by his side, he knew he had the strength to keep going. "You've given me more than I could ever repay, buddy," Jack said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Max lifted his head, then licked Jack's hand, as if to say, "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing my job." Jack smiled, feeling the warmth of that unconditional love. Together, they had faced the darkest moments of Jack's life, and together, they would face whatever came next. It had been a few months since Jack came home from the hospital. Every day, he felt himself getting stronger, both physically and emotionally. The hardest part of his recovery was over, but there were still days when his body ached or his mind felt tired. Those were the days Max helped the most. Max was always there, standing beside him, his eyes full of understanding. The dog knew when Jack needed a break and when he needed a push. Sometimes, Max would nudge Jack's hand with his nose, as if saying, "Come on, it's time to move forward again." One morning, Jack stood in front of his mirror, looking at the reflection that seemed so different from the man he had once been. His muscles were still weak, and his movements were slower, but there was a fire in his eyes, a fire that hadn't been there before. The old Jack had been full of energy, always in a rush, always doing. But this new Jack was more patient, more grateful, and it was all thanks to Max. "You ready for another walk, buddy?" Jack asked, his voice filled with warmth. Max barked happily and ran to the door, his tail wagging. Jack smiled and grabbed the leash. Walking had become a daily routine for them. At first, it had been a slow, tiring process, but now it was something Jack looked forward to. The walk was never just about exercise. It was about the bond they shared. It was about moving forward together. Today, as they walked along the familiar path by the lake, Jack noticed how much stronger his legs felt. He wasn't rushing, but he was walking with more confidence. Max was by his side, as always, his leash gently tugging Jack forward. "You're not getting any younger, are you, Max?" Jack said, looking down at his dog. Max barked in reply, as if to say, "I'm still here for you." The lake was calm, the sun shining brightly in the sky. Jack felt at peace. The world had seemed so overwhelming just a few months ago, but now it felt like a place of hope. The journey wasn't over, but it was easier to face when Max was with him. Back at home, Jack had started doing more than just physical therapy. He had resumed some of the things he used to enjoy, like gardening. The simple act of planting flowers or tending to the garden helped him feel like himself again. Max would always follow him outside, lying in the grass while Jack worked. One afternoon, As Jack planted new flowers by the porch, Max lay nearby, watching the world go by. Jack stopped for a moment to catch his breath, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. He glanced down at Max, who had his head resting on his paws. "You know, you're the best therapy I've ever had," Jack said with a soft smile. Max wagged his tail lazily, as if to say, "I'm just doing my job." Jack chuckled and returned to his work. The flowers were coming along nicely, and the garden was starting to look more colorful. It was a small victory, but it felt huge to Jack. It was another step forward in his recovery. It was another way of showing himself that he could still do the things he loved, even if it took a little longer. That evening, as the sun set over the lake, Jack and Max sat together on the porch. The world was peaceful, and the air was cool. Jack leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "It's been a long road, huh, Max?" Jack said, looking at his dog. Max let out a soft bark, as if in agreement. "But we made it, and we're going to keep going." Jack thought about everything he had been through. There were days when he felt hopeless, when he didn't know if he could keep going. But Max had always been there, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Max had never given up on him, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. And now, they were both stronger for it. "You're more than just a dog, Max," Jack said softly, his voice full of emotion. "You've been my best friend, my strength, and my reason to keep going." Max lay his head on Jack's lap, looking up at him with those familiar, trusting eyes. Jack stroked Max's fur, feeling the warmth of the bond they shared. He couldn't imagine life without Max. Together, they had faced the darkest moments. And together, they were moving forward into a brighter future. As Jack sat there, feeling the cool breeze and watching the stars appear in the sky, he knew one thing for sure: no matter what the future held, he and Max would face it together. They had been through so much, but they had each other. And with that, they could conquer anything. It was a cool autumn morning when Jack woke up feeling more determined than ever. He had been making steady progress, and today, something felt different. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a golden light over the lake. The world was quiet, calm, and peaceful. Max was already awake, as usual. The dog had been Jack's constant companion through every step of his recovery, and today was no different. Max's eyes shone with excitement, and his tail wagged in a steady rhythm as he stood by Jack's side. "You ready for today, buddy?" Jack asked, smiling as he reached down to pet Max's head. Max barked in reply, his enthusiasm infectious. Today, Jack had something special planned. For the first time in months, he was going to take Max on a real adventure. A hike through the woods behind his house. It was something they used to do all the time before everything changed. Jack had been slowly getting stronger, and today, he felt ready to take that next big step. As Jack got dressed, Max followed him around the house, his paws clicking against the floor in excitement. Jack chuckled as he put on his hiking boots, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The road to recovery had been long, and some days had been harder than others. But today felt like the start of something new. They packed a small bag with water, snacks, and Max's favorite tennis ball. Jack's legs still weren't as strong as they used to be, but he was determined to try. As he stepped out the door, he felt a wave of pride. This was the kind of thing he had thought he might never do again. But with Max by his side, he knew there were no limits. The hike started slowly. Jack took each step carefully, his cane helping him balance as they made their way through the woods. Max trotted ahead, always looking back to make sure Jack was keeping up. Every time Jack stumbled, Max would stop and wait, his eyes full of concern. It was as if Max knew Jack needed a moment to gather his strength. "You're the best, Max," Jack said with a laugh, patting the dog's head. "You're always watching out for me." Max wagged his tail and gave a soft bark, as if to say, "Of course I am. That's what I'm here for." The forest was peaceful, filled with the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Jack had missed this, being out in nature, feeling connected to the world around him. It reminded him that life was still beautiful, even after everything he had been through. After a while, Jack decided to take a break by a small clearing near a stream. He sat down on a rock, breathing deeply as he watched Max chase after a butterfly. The sight brought a smile to Jack's face. It wasn't just the physical progress that mattered, he realized. It was the small moments, the ones that reminded him how much life had to offer, even in its simplest form. "You're a good boy, Max," Jack said as Max trotted back over to him, panting happily. "I don't know what I would do without you." Max nuzzled Jack's hand, looking up at him with pure love and loyalty. Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. There were days when he had doubted himself, days when he felt like giving up. But Max had never let him give up. Max had always believed in him, even when Jack had trouble believing in himself. They spent some time at the clearing, enjoying the peace and quiet. When Jack felt ready, he stood up and continued on the trail. The hike was challenging, but with Max by his side, it felt easier. They took it slow, one step at a time. By the time they reached the top of the hill, Jack was tired, but he felt accomplished. The view from the top was breathtaking. The sun had risen higher in the sky, and the landscape below was bathed in warm light. Jack took a deep breath, soaking in the beauty of the moment. "I did it, Max," Jack said, his voice filled with pride. "We did it." Max sat next to Jack, his head resting on Jack's knee, as if sharing the moment with him. Jack knew there would still be hard days ahead, but today, he had proven to himself that he could still live the life he wanted. With Max by his side, anything was possible. As they made their way back home, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't the same person he had been before. He was stronger, more grateful, and more determined to live life to the fullest. And with Max by his side, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The next few months were filled with ups and downs, but Jack was finally starting to feel like he had truly found his new normal. His strength was improving every day, and although there were still tough moments, the future no longer felt as overwhelming. Jack knew that life would never be exactly the same as it once was, but he had come to accept that. What mattered most now was the bond he shared with Max, and that bond was unbreakable. One chilly morning, Jack woke up early. The house was quiet, and Max was still curled up at the foot of his bed, sleeping soundly. Jack stood up slowly, stretching his arms and legs. He had a full day ahead of him, but for some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Max lifted his head when he heard Jack move. The dog's tail wagged once, then he stretched before jumping off the bed and trotting over to Jack's side. "Good morning, buddy," Jack said with a smile, scratching behind Max's ears. Max barked happily in reply, as if saying, "Good morning to you too." Jack had been working hard to regain his strength, and today he had a special appointment at the rehabilitation center. It was a big step. He would be meeting with a doctor to discuss the possibility of returning to a more active lifestyle. The idea of being more independent again excited him, but it also made him nervous. What if he wasn't ready? What if his body still wasn't strong enough? Max seemed to sense Jack's anxiety. He walked up to Jack and nudged his hand, looking up at him with those familiar, knowing eyes. Jack smiled, feeling a wave of calm wash over him. Max was right there, just like always, offering silent support. "You're right," Jack whispered, bending down to hug his dog. "I can do this. With you by my side. I know I can." At the rehabilitation center, the doctor had a lot of tests for Jack to complete. He was asked to walk on a treadmill, do some strength exercises, and even practice a few balance routines. It wasn't easy. Jack's legs still weren't as strong as they used to be, and there were moments when he felt like giving up. But Max wasn't there to see him struggle, and that made it harder. There was one moment, halfway through the session, when Jack felt like everything was too much. His legs were trembling, and his breath came in short gasps. He reached for the handrail, but for a brief second, he felt his confidence slipping away. Maybe he wasn't ready after all. The doctor noticed his hesitation. "Take a moment, Jack," she said gently. "It's okay. You've come so far already." Jack closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The doctor was right. He had made so much progress, and even though he still had a long way to go, he wasn't the same man who had first walked into this place months ago. As Jack stood there, gathering his strength, he thought about Max. He thought about all the times the dog had been there when Jack felt like giving up. Max had never let him down. Max had always believed in him, even when Jack couldn't believe in himself. And now, it was time for Jack to believe in himself too. "I can do this," Jack whispered, more to himself than anyone else. With that, he took a step forward, then another. He pushed through the challenge, focusing on each movement, remembering how far he had come. Step by step, Jack made it through the rest of the exercises. Later that day, as Jack left the rehabilitation center, he felt a sense of pride. He was tired, but it was the kind of tired that came with accomplishment, not defeat. As he climbed into the car, Max jumped into the back seat, wagging his tail. Jack turned to the dog with a smile. "You won't believe what we did today," Jack said, his voice filled with excitement. "I made it through the toughest session yet, and I didn't give up. I couldn't have done it without you, Max." Max barked happily, his eyes sparkling with joy. Jack laughed, his heart full. "I know, buddy. We're a team, and we're going to keep going." As they drove home, Jack felt a quiet confidence settle over him. He was still on his journey, still working hard to rebuild his life, but he knew he was stronger than ever. The road ahead wasn't easy, but with Max by his side, Jack felt ready to face anything that came his way. That night, as Jack and Max sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above the lake, Jack thought about how much they had both been through. They had faced challenges, yes, but they had faced them together. And that, Jack realized, was what made all the difference. With Max by his side, he could face anything the future had in store,